Okay, so I feel it's topical to discuss a bit the Brazilian presidential election. Brazil's a big country, the world's fourth biggest democracy after India, the United States, and Indonesia, if we go by population. Um, now, just a disclaimer before I get into this. Whenever I talk about any election, I spoke about the Filipino election earlier this year. Um, I totally recognize that first and foremost, it's up to the Brazilian people. Okay, so outsiders like myself should respect that. It's their decision and it's the future of their country. However, one thing about democracy is transparency. And if a country, particularly a big country like Brazil, is transparent, then outsiders are going to have views on it. Um, the bigger the country, the more implications there are. And in the case of Brazil, I do think there's vested international interest because of the importance of the Amazon. It's literally the lungs of the world. So the political direction that Brazil goes in is actually very important in that sense. So the results of the second round show that Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has, I was going to say, been re-elected, but not a consecutive term. He was president from 2003 to 2010, but he has now come back to the presidency. I believe his inauguration will be the 1st of January. Um, I think many Democrats, frankly, around the world will be breathing a sigh of relief. Jair Bolsonaro is a very controversial figure. It's not for nothing that he's been called the tropical Trump. If you're a Brazilian and you're a Bolsonaro supporter, I'm probably going to say some things here that might trigger you or offend you. Well, sorry, but this is the internet and there's not much you can do about it. It's my honest opinion. This is the cover of The Economist magazine from 2018, the last Brazilian presidential election. Latin America's latest menace. If we just start with the environmental issue, I'll come to Lula in a second, but under his presidency, Bolsonaro has pretty much offered no protection. Rather, he's extended mining, farming rights, and we're seeing profound destruction on his watch. Now, he's still president for another 2 months. He is yet to concede, at least in the last reports I saw, he is yet to concede. So maybe he's going to throw a tantrum like Trump and show himself to be a sore loser. It is troubling that leading up to the second round, there was reports of violence and intimidation, mostly aimed at Lula's supporters. This is bad for democracy. Now, a country as big as Brazil has a whole host of problems, a whole host of challenges. Crime is certainly one of them, although stereotype of Brazil having very high crime rates, it is high, but compared to some of its neighbors in Latin America, it's perhaps lower than people might think. I mean, it doesn't have the sort of crime rate, for example, of Venezuela or Honduras. Still, it has a problem with violence. There's no glossing that over. Rio favelas, Sao Paulo, neighborhoods, they could be incredibly dangerous. There's also a lot of guns in Brazil. So these are real issues. Bolsonaro's big on gun rights. Now, I'm conservative on crime, and I fully appreciate that Brazilian victims of crime may look at a left winger like Lula and say he's not going to help victims of crime. Bolsonaro is. So I'm sensitive to that point. I get that that might be one of the pull factors for Bolsonaro. That's very much been the case in the Philippines with Duterte and now Marcos, that they put this image of being tough on crime. I get that. If you have gangs basically terrorizing the public, then of course people want action against that. And I think to unify Brazil, Lula should show that he is on the side of victims of crime. Lula's a popular figure, from what I gather. He was a popular president. He was respected around the world. He is a leftist, but I don't think that, at least from an international perspective, there isn't the same kind of fear about Lula as there is with a figure like um, certainly Chavez in Brazil, Maduro is the name I was looking for, and some other far left figures. Lula is definitely on the left, but a little bit more centre left, somewhat more moderate left. But the fact of the matter is, he is going to take the problem of environmentalism seriously, and he's not going to be cavalier with the Amazon. I mean, this isn't any forest. This is the Amazon, it's the lungs of the world. So I think, in terms of those who recognise that there is a problem, this is good news. If the political direction is going to go that way, whereby there's going to be a decrease in logging and farming permits and more protection for indigenous people. Um, I'm not going to say Lula is squeaky clean himself. Of course, his administration got tied up in Operation Car Wash and the corruption scandals that were around that. Although, of course, his side has denied that. But what strikes me about Bolsonaro is what an unpleasant character he is. I mean, this is a man who has been openly homophobic and misogynistic, racist. And you don't need to be woke or a leftist to see that. Bolsonaro is toxic. Um, the guy basically has a penchant for dictatorship, and he idolizes Brazil's military dictatorship. I think if Bolsonaro had his way, Brazil wouldn't be a democracy. There would be no election. He would simply be a president for life, like some of those dictators of old in Latin America. Um, and when we look at a world which has seen a push towards authoritarianism, certainly Xi in China, Putin in Russia, and around the world, have someone who is on the centre left. I don't think Lula is hard left. That has to be good for democracy. Now, this is not to say that Lula is perfect. It's not to say that there won't be legitimate things that Bolsonaro supporters feel about. And again, it's not for me as an outsider tell Brazilians how to vote. I'm just saying, as an outsider, I welcome this result. I think Bolsonaro was bad for Brazil and bad for the world. Um, and I do think he was a wannabe dictator. So that's how I see it. Um, I hope Rishi Sunak has called him up to congratulate him, and I hope Bolsonaro will actually, for once, show some statesmanship and concede defeat and show that he actually cares about democracy. Maybe like Trump, he has a very thin ego and he won't bring himself to do that because he won't, losing will be seen as weakness. Except a true Democrat, a true leader would say, I lost, congratulations to the winner, let's unify as Brazilians. But no, Bolsonaro is probably going to kick up a stink. His supporters, I don't know what they'll do, but um, Lula has to listen to concerns that Bolsonaro supporters have. If crime is one of the big ones, then Lula has to take that issue seriously. But I honestly think that this is a welcome result. That's my perception. I could be dead wrong. Maybe Lula's second term as president will be lackluster. Certainly, he will have to go up against perhaps conservatives in Congress. I don't know the precise makeup of the Brazilian um, parliament, but yeah, that's the situation. We'll see what happens. We'll see if Bolsonaro concedes graciously. More likely, he'll say nothing. But will he have a toxic influence on some of his more hardcore supporters? I mean, it's interesting because some of the things that are going on in Brazil are not that dissimilar to the United States. There's culture wars, there's issues around gun rights and all that sort of thing, abortion. So it's not a totally detached political climate from the US. Um, but the Amazon is the lungs of the world. I keep coming back to this because I think that people say, oh, well, it's a sovereign issue in Brazil. Not really. The Amazon also crosses into other countries, incidentally, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia. So I think, you know, Brazilian presidents have to accept yes, it's Brazilian territory, but this is something that impacts the entire world. That's why a Brazilian presidential election is a big deal.